making their way in. But it's kind of funny because we do a lot of these webinars. Remember the old days when we do face-to-face PD and face-to-face meetings, or you'd go to a conference and you had like 5 minutes to run to the next room? The great thing about Zoom is you don't have to run to the next room unless you have to go to the bathroom, of course. So anyways, hopefully you are enjoying your afternoon. We totally want to welcome you to our session today. We're super excited. Hopefully you guys can hear me, right? Can you hear me? Okay, cool. I got a few notes. Yeah. All right. So I do want to welcome you to our professional development on supporting ABAR through digital innovation series. And the reason why it's a series is because we have a few more sessions coming up in the future. You can see we've got using digital tools to build and maintain relationships. We have one called using digital tools to facilitate collaborations. And what does it look like next year, which I'm really excited about because we're probably all thinking about that right now. What does next year look like? So, all right, Kristin. Awesome. So today's session is building community through feedback, which we're really super excited about. We have two fantastic guests coming and joining us today, Rebecca Larson and Crenshaw, who will be introducing themselves and telling more about themselves in a few minutes. My name is Giles. If you don't know who I am, thank you for being here. And I just want to say, hey, it's great to see all of you. My position is a TOSA, just like my other friends, Nichole and Carrie and Kristin. And so we're really excited that you're here. Our agenda, we'll put the links, we'll put the slide deck in the agenda in the chat if you haven't seen it yet. We'll make sure all of you have it, but our agenda is broken into breakout rooms and some great conversations. So we're really excited that you're here. Hopefully you are able to participate in the breakout room that you would like to join. I think our conversations are going to be great today. So with that being said, we are going to have a back channel, and I just want to make sure that this is supposed to be Nichole. So Nichole,
it is, but can you do it? Can you go ahead and do it for me, Chris, while I'm continuing to?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. We have a back channel, which basically means you're more than welcome to continue to chat, use the chat in the Zoom, not a problem. But if you would love to chat in a space where potentially colleagues or grade band colleagues or peers are in, such as the 3-5, the K2, the 3-5 in the middle school, we will make sure we put those links in the chat or also on the Google slide deck, because you might want to continue the conversation in a space where folks that you work with or grade level bands are going to be able to respond to those questions. So we'll make sure we put those in the chat in just a minute. We want to continue this conversation beyond just this space. So that's one of the reasons why we have this happening. We also realize, and I don't know if all of you know this or not, but Google has a limit of 50 or so per Google Doc for a live session. So we broke it into smaller groups so that we have more opportunities for more friends to join those live sessions today. All right.
All right. I'm really glad I got my sound worked out. Nichole, do we want to start recording? Or I can
I am recording. We're
okay,
good.
Great. My sound went out. All right. As welcome, thank you for being here. We wanted to, as we are talking about feedback, center it in our ABAR work and talk about how evaluation and feedback practices shape academic opportunities and our students' identities. And when we're doing this, we want to focus on practices that support collaboration, support engagement, and support equal opportunities so that students are comfortable taking the risks that are required to stretch themselves academically and personally. And feedback provides really valuable ways to encourage students' natural ways of learning. It helps us to build caring relationships with our students and can help to build community between teachers and students and students and students. So as we center our work today, we'd like for you to be looking at culturally responsive teaching practices. In a minute, we're going to ask that you read over the document. And as we listen to our teacher presenter today, we want to do it through the lens of culturally responsive teaching, which is a mindset and the actions necessary to break the predictive link between student demographics and student success. There are 3 key tenets of culturally responsive teaching: knowing yourself, knowing your students, and knowing and adapting your practice. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie, who's going to introduce our first breakout room.
Thank you, Kristin. All right, we're going to go ahead and launch into our breakout rooms. And the very first thing is we wanted to give you an opportunity to talk with those in a similar grade band about how you see those CRT tenets connecting to student feedback. So it's linked there for you, and it's what Kristin just mentioned on knowing your students well, how you see that working in your classroom in terms of feedback. And obviously, this is the same breakout room that you'll be going back to 3 times today. So we'll get to hear from a presenter, and then we'll go into that breakout room to have an opportunity to talk about how that might apply to your grade level and your subject specific classroom. So probably take an opportunity to introduce yourself and what you teach and where you're from to that group as well, because you'll be seeing them a few times. So Nichole, if we are ready, we can go ahead and launch into those breakout rooms for probably about 8 minutes or so.
A few moments later.
All right, looks like our friends are coming back to our main space. Hopefully you had a chance to at least meet some friends, introduce yourselves at the very least, because we do want you to go ahead and engage in those conversations in the same room with the same friends. One of our goals was people to go ahead and take a look at the CRT document, and then just kind of look at that in the lens of feedback. No stress if you did not. I do want to introduce a really great friend of mine, Rebecca Larson, and she's going to go ahead and basically share her experience and how feedback has made how she uses feedback to basically build a community. But I do want to say one of my favorite things about Rebecca, her quote that she used a few weeks ago when we gave another presentation, was that she uses feedback to build community with students, and it still sticks with me today. She mentioned this a few weeks ago. And so I want to introduce Rebecca. Rebecca, go ahead and tell us who you are, what you do, and I'd love for you to share the things you have for us today.
Absolutely. So hi, I'm Rebecca Larson, and I'm just honored to present today. I am part of BMAC, and like many of your students, although I look white presenting and I have a white last name, I'm actually half Mexican, and my maiden name is Ramirez. And my dad was an ESL student, and I have a real passion for my ESL students and my students who are multilingual. I love working with Canvas and the opportunities it gives us to work with our multilingual students. And feedback to me is just one of those like small, I guess, simple classroom practices that let us connect with students and think about CRT and cultural relevant teaching and how to connect kind of individually with students, which is what I think the Speed Grader gives us. So I broke it up here. Feel free to use the chat too. If you have questions as you go, you can drop that. I kind of have it up here, and I know some other people are monitoring it. So if you have anything to add, please do, things that work for you perhaps, or questions that you want us to address. We can absolutely get to that. One of the things that I love about SpeedGrader is my phone. This year, more than ever, I have 3 kids at home, and so I am trying to grade as much as I can. And oftentimes I do it on my phone. I was just doing it yesterday. And so what I do, especially in the beginning, like I had them listing, how does your family make rice? Because rice is like a universal food. And so they are explaining in a discussion, like, this is how my family makes rice. And it's everything from like the 90-minute bag rice that you put in the microwave to like these like elaborate, like delicious, rices from around the world. So I try to bring things like that where they can really bring their ideas and their culture, whatever that is. But with formative feedback, I just use things like, the like drooly face, or like the thumbs up, or like me too. I use very like text speak. I like OMG, or like, of course. I'm also, like many millennials, addicted to TikTok myself. And so I feel like I'm very fluent with chat and emojis and that. I know to use the dead face instead of the crying emoji now, because that makes you seem old, apparently. At least that's what the TikTok Gen Z tells me. So I use that for like simple, here it is, here we go. And I do that right in the submission comments. And I typically do that with my phone. If you have a teacher iPad, you also have those. That would be a lot harder to do kind of in like the Speed Grader on our laptops. But that's where I'm like, yes. I also kind of use that thumbs up and thumbs down on formative feedback. I'm an English teacher, and so I give a lot of feedback as we're doing kind of our writing projects. And so if I want them to know, like, yes, you are on the right track, it's like thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Or if I'm like confused, it's like the little like confusey shrug. So those are like the quick things where I just want to make sure students know, hey, I'm looking at your work and I want you to know that I'm connecting with it in this way and you're on the right track or not. And that's kind of in the beginning of the unit. Mid-process feedback is a little bit different. That's when I'm really checking on student work. And I think about it like walking around the room. And that's what I tell students. Like I have them turn stuff in every single day. And I tell them, I'm like, I always tell them, it's going to be trash. Like, this is your trash writing. I'm like, and I show them my trash writing. I do it live with them. And then I turn it in and I'm like, yeah, it's terrible right now. But I give them on this mid-process feedback, you know, the grammar is terrible. There's no paragraphs, like there's nothing good right now. So it's not like I'm trying to correct anything. Again, I'm just trying to see their ideas to help me think about what am I going to teach them next and to make sure they're on the right track. So I give quick audio comments, and you can do that right on your laptop. Or again, if you have the app, the teacher app, you can use a different device for that. Or the speech to text ones are also a time saver. My like mouse shoulder, as I like to call it, gets really tired from doing everything. And so the speech to text comments work really, really well for that. And that's normally a quick like, hey, this is how it's going, or anything. I used to do more video comments, but now with my kids around, it's harder for me to do that. And so I've gotten to audio comments instead. Then near like the end of the feedback, so I'm more project-based, whether we're writing an essay, or as you can see, like the image with the little US country, they created a project for that for communication. I like to use like direct feedback near the end. I always have students what I call a perfect Larson draft, which means that they are done with the project. It's normally, you know, what they think is perfect. I'm like, turn in your perfect draft. So they turn in their perfect draft. And then within the next 24, 48 hours, depending, I give them basically a grade and tell them, these are all the things that you did great. These are all the things that you might want to look at. And it gives them that opportunity. And then I give them another kind of day to work on it, and a day that come in and see me like office hours, because, you know, some of the projects are not great. And I'm always like, hey, why don't you drop by office hours? But that's when I do like my majority of grading, like huge feedback. So I use my iPad for that, and a pen for like direct annotations on that. Or you can do it on SpeedGrader, you know, the little text box highlighting things and giving direct feedback right on the document, just as if a student was coming to me and I had their paper and I'm looking at it. I mark it up exactly as I would if I was grading it. And then I kind of give an overall, again, audio comments. And what's not here, and one thing that I do want to say, whether I'm giving kind of mid-process feedback or end of the, you know, feedback or summative feedback, it's really, really important for us to use student names, specifically if student names are perhaps not their synergy names. It really creates this foundation of, I know you, I see you, and we are like connected, we are talking here together. And so I think that's really important. So I'm always like, hey, Ruby, thanks so much for turning this in. I'm so impressed with blah, 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 blah. Look in paragraph 3, because when I saw it, I noticed blah, 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 blah. And then she can scroll, see the feedback and go, oh, this is what Mrs. Larson was talking about. So same type of idea there. And then at the very end, the formal summative feedback, I do use Canvas's rubrics because I find them extremely helpful. So I can kind of click, I have my BSD rubrics in there, and I just do overall comments at the end. Because I've done so much work previously, I give very little like end of the product. It's normally like, wow, this turned out great, or great job, or I loved the revisions. And I teach high school, so like sometimes there aren't revisions. Sometimes the kid was like, wow, I'm at a B, I'm happy with that. And I'm like, that's great, so glad you turned this in, because everyone is in a little different space, and I'm not here to judge how they use their time. So I also, once I kind of have all of that, or even when I just started, like I just started a new class this week, I always want to make sure students see my comments. And I know this is crucial for all teachers, right? Like you want to make sure that your kids see your comments. If you want, and we know this from everything, right? It's why I do choice reading. If you want kids to see the comments, you have to give them time to look at the comments. And so I will point it out. I will say, look, this is how you see your comments. I will model it for them on Zoom while I share my screen. And I'll say, I want everyone to look at their comments. And then after that, sometimes I'll have them respond to me just in the submission comment box and say like, hey, what did you see, or what you're going to work on? But more often, I just do a whole new Canvas assignment that says like, comment feedback plan. And I have them go, what did Mrs. Larson say? Okay, what is your plan now? What are you going to do in the future? And then normally I have them like go into breakout rooms and share with other people. But then I also know they read what I said, there's no misunderstanding, and then they can kind of take that and do it into their work. So that is I think, kind of overall like a process of what I do. And you can see my like annotating there. My students say, I mean, we're at Sunset, so we're purple, but they're like, oh, my paper's always bleeding purple. But it's better than red, right? I guess so. And as Nichole pointed out, elementary crowd, absolutely, right? Seesaw has its abilities. I have my kids, I have the Seesaw app for my kids, and I see the teachers like going back to them. And I actually talked to my daughter today who's in 5th grade. Like, do you read the comments? Do you like see what your teacher does? She's like, yeah. She's like, sometimes I respond, sometimes I don't. I'm like, okay, just, you know, check it out, making sure you're doing your thing. Was there anything I missed, Chris? Anything you want me to kind of?
I think that was fantastic. And I feel like what we'll do in just a moment, friends, is we're going to go ahead and we'll go to those breakout rooms. Before we do the breakout rooms, we'll put it in the slot in the chat again, but we have 2 questions that we would like for you to consider. And we'll go to the next slide, Kristin. And so the 2 questions we want you to consider when you go to your breakout rooms. And again, you're not required to answer both. Choose one, share one. Ask about one, but how do you use feedback to build community and relationships? Think about your own experience, your own teaching practices, and what are some of your feedback challenges and successes? And, you know, just like Nichole had mentioned and Rebecca had mentioned, you know, our goal is to talk about feedback, and it's, yes, in middle school, high school, we use Canvas, some elementary teachers do as well. Feedback is feedback, and so we want to kind of honor that that's the actual thing we're talking about, not necessarily the actual platform itself. So so I think we're going to go ahead and we have breakout rooms, I believe, for 10 minutes. We're 5 minutes ahead, which is awesome because that could potentially mean 5 minutes of free time. I don't know at the end. So, but Rebecca will probably join one of those groups. I think she'll join one of those groups. If you're lucky enough to get Rebecca in your group, maybe you can ask her a question there. Please throw in your questions in the chat. Please throw your questions in the Google Docs. And then Nichole, are you ready to go ahead and kick us to the breakout rooms? If you are, awesome. And I'll copy these questions and I'll throw these questions in the chat as well.
A few moments later.
Okay, it looks like we have people heading back from their breakout rooms, and hopefully you had an opportunity to have a good discussion with peers about feedback. A reminder about the back channel: if you do have questions, you can put it there, and we do have an open mic at the end if you have any questions or things that you want to share. So just a reminder that is coming as well. Our next speaker is Kat Crenshaw, and she is a 5th grade teacher at Shoals Heights Elementary. And she's going to be talking to us about how she creates community in her classroom through conferring. She's going to talk about how she does that whole group, small group, and then also individually with students. And although she is an elementary teacher, like, well, what do I have to learn from a 5th grade teacher? I think plenty. I think the way that an elementary teacher structures things and is able to meet the needs of individual kids is unique to elementary, but also applicable to other grades as well. So as you're listening to her, how could that apply to your classroom? So Miss Kat, go for it.
Hi, all. I am Kat Crenshaw, and I'm really pleased and honored to be here. And I want to state a disclaimer right away that nothing I say here is original. I have plagiarized or stolen it from all of you at one time or another. So these are ideas I've gleaned just over the years of teaching and from the professional development classes that we've had over the few years. I'm a recent 5 years, this is my 5th year transplant from Southern Oregon to Beaverton. And so I had great professional development there, and I have even better professional development here. So everything I'm sharing with you is stuff that I've taken from those or from you or from breakout rooms and applied in my practice. And I am continuing to grow and learn. So if you have ideas or things you can improve upon anything I say, please share. That being said, I like to think about my classroom as kind of, if you could picture in your mind a target, and there are 3 circles, and the outside of the circle is the whole group portion of my entire operation with children, and then the middle circle is small groups, and the center circle is that individual student. And everything that I do works toward that relationship with that individual child and building that connection, because I find that when I have a great relationship with a student. The conferring and everything else I do in class, from planning lessons to giving feedback to making it fun for kids, is easier if I have that relationship built. And that requires time and thought, which often I think we feel stressed and are unable to balance. And I have to often take breaths and say it's about the kids. So I start with a growth mindset culture. Every single day we have a growth mindset moment. It will focus on either a notable person in history or a concept or something, and I vary it, but it always focuses on we're not there yet, we're growing. Mistakes are welcome opportunities to learn, and I try to set that from the very first day. And then of course I model with making a few mistakes of my own, not necessarily intentionally, but that's always an opportunity to grow and learn, and I model that for them too. I give students every single day an opportunity to personally reflect and to write about what they're feeling, or they can engage with a prompt or whatever. When they come into my room, they'll have an opportunity to respond to a prompt written, but also in the chat. I'll say, okay, type in chat, how are you feeling today? Or maybe it changes depending. Today's was, how are you feeling today? And then so I leverage the chat and the reactions too for everything. So as I'm teaching or having the kids discuss, I'm monitoring chat. If I see that somebody's particularly quiet on a day, I might buzz a private message to them, ask how they're doing, check in. So my whole group is all about opportunities for them to engage with each other. I try to make it less of me, more of them. Of course, I want to get the content across. I want to teach the lessons, but I want them engaging as well, because that's our time to build our community. And I often give them opportunities to decide how it's going to go, if they want a breakout room or whole group. And they'll let me know how they're feeling. Generally, they choose breakout rooms, and I'm pretty busy when that happens, popping in throughout them back and forth. So I use all the things, polls, comments, surveys, reactions, to get feedback from them and give them an opportunity to share their voice in as many different ways. So I guess the way I look at it is, I'm that gourmet cook, and if I can provide them a smorgasbord of opportunities to connect and interact with each other, with the content, with me, that's my goal. Then we move to small groups. So those are our breakout rooms, our small groups later in the day. I like to randomize my breakout rooms, and then I only have a few edits. Usually it does a pretty good job, but then I might notice that one group is kind of not so heterogeneous, and I want to switch out a few people so I have a broad mix, and I make sure that happens. So I'm constantly working to have students interacting with all of the class, not just the same folks all the time. I set up my small groups that I meet with throughout the week based on what I'm seeing in class, what I see on certain assignments, and that can change week to week. And then I do have impromptu small groups. Students will express a need, and I am responsive to that and say, yeah, let's do that. Let's, and my goal in my small groups is to listen, then to ask the questions. If I'm moving around from group to group, I'm going to listen first, ask some questions to gather information or to get them thinking about what they might want to do. And then my goal is to suggest, because my ultimate goal here is student ownership of their learning. And so I want to give them as much opportunity to do that and to practice those skills of decision making early, because they're going to need those going into middle school and high school. So I want to give them now time and a safe place to do that. So then when I get to individual time, I really am big on teaching students to use success criteria to move their work to the next level. And this is daily conversations. So look at what you are doing. Here's the success criteria. Look at what what do you think about your performance? How can you move? I give them opportunities in small groups to peer edit, peer evaluate, reflect together. And then when they meet with me individually, they've had some rehearsal on how to do this. And then we can talk. I do the Matt Glover way: research, notice a strength, nudge to the next level with a teaching point, one teaching point. My big challenge is that I tend to want to push and not nudge. So I'm working on that. And I'm often known to say, what do you want to do here? You're the author, you're the writer. How do you want to do that? Which strategy would you like to use in math? And then I really like to create paths for asynchronous conversations, because that's where they can feed back to me, I can feed to them. And Seesaw is really wonderful for this with the comments. I do have students commenting back. And then when I use, and I'll show on the next slide when I get there, some things I use to keep that conversation loop going. But I try to do that as much as possible. Email, I teach them early on, email me. I check it. I hate the notification things, so I'll check it and I'll respond. And then I establish a goal setting cycle and I make that a routine. Each week we look at how we did, we set a new goal for the week, we go back and revisit that on Monday, talk about it, set the goal, work it throughout the week, and then we come back and we do that after each writing project is turned in. Take a look. That's part of actually the final feedback. What's your goal for next time? What's your goal for the next thing? Write it down. So on the next slide, you'll see my top 5 go-to tools. So the first thing I do is on the left there, that's my blank. It's blank right now because I didn't want to put kids' names in there, but this is a page out of our weekly planner. My group is using Seesaw, but this could work in Canvas too. I would have a daily schedule embedded on my front page for them so they could see that. But this is located at the back of the planner, but then I note it on every single day who's coming up as well. But I have, right now we're doing book clubs on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then I have places where I can meet with math groups or individual students and have office hours are their choice. They get to choose. Unless I see that I want to have a conversation with somebody, and then I might ask them to come, but most of the time the others are, I'll have either small groups. If I'm doing conferring with students, I might do half the class one week, the next half the next week. If I'm doing individual, sometimes I can do smaller groups. Up in the middle, I'm a big person. I love Notability with my iPad when I'm conferring with a student to keep notes. So just create a category for the subject area. I mean, you can read that. Down below that is a peer reflection form that I have. And I have students, when they're working in small groups, reflect on their behavior and contributions, but also they get to tell me what they thought of their team members. At this point, I haven't had them share that with each other. But I think if I got to the place where I felt like the community felt safe enough, I might have them talk about how they might do that, or have them do that as a group, fill it out and give one score maybe. Then up in the upper right is this one I did create on my own. This is my emergency meeting among us about my week. And it's got questions there that students can respond to. I think I have the link for that in my slide, and then also to the peer form that you can make a copy of for yourself. But I do that weekly. I let kids know. And then if somebody is pretty silent on those, I make a point of checking in with them a little extra. Or, you know, there's a place, is there something you want your teacher to know there? They can do that. And finally, the bottom one is a system I learned from a 3rd grade teacher, actually, and it's beautiful. but that's our book creator journals. Those are our writing journals, and those are our daily writing journals. And each week they have to have at least one entry in there. But when they're done, they put a gold star on there. So that indicates to me that they have items in there that they want feedback on. And then when I go read it, I change the color of the star and I write a note in there, check feedback inside. And in every feedback I give, I ask a question, because that's like the ball. I'm lobbing the ball to them, lob it back to me with a response, right? So those are just a few of the things that I do. Certainly glad for any ideas you have to offer about that, but it's kind of how I just keep it going with students and build that relationship. And the more I get to know them, the more seamless it kind of becomes.
Kat, that was awesome. Thank you so much. I love how you empower them to have their own voice in their own decision making amongst their goal setting. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hop into another breakout room to kind of think about what you just heard from Kat say, and that how you could perhaps apply those, or what you're already doing in your classroom around feedback in that way. So these are the questions. Again, these are suggestions. You can pick one of them, or you guys can talk about whatever it is you want to talk about in there. How do you structure your classroom so students can work in heterogeneous, cooperative environment where they can learn about and from each other? So how do you make sure that those groupings happen? And then to set up work groups for conferring, what are some of the strategies you use to foster and facilitate an environment where all students feel included, respected, valued, cared for, seen, and heard by both you and their classmates? So you can choose one that resonates with you and hop to your breakout rooms to chat more about feedback and being inclusive.
A few moments later.
All right, I think all of our friends are back. Thank you for taking time in your breakout rooms. I hope that you were able to have deep conversation. As we start to reflect on this, we wanted to provide some open mic time where you can ask questions of our presenters, or you can share out. We know that there are fantastic ideas across the district, and would love to have people share. One of the things that came up in a couple rooms is that feedback takes significant time. And if there were any tips or tricks to do this effectively as well as efficiently, and I wanted to open that up first to our presenters and then to the rest of us that are in the room. So Rebecca or Kat, if you have any thoughts to share.
Yeah, so I teach English, high school English, and college writing, writing 121. So I've become an expert at quick. One is knowing what type of feedback I'm doing. Also, I think we all kind of create like keys, like mine are stars are good. And my students kind of know that, or if you color code, like blue is bad, yellow is good. So students kind of have that information. But also to know that it is so worthwhile and that taking that time is going to pay off. Like, that's what I always tell myself. I know they're going to, like, I know this is important. I know it's going to, and it literally takes hours. Yes. But it's also setting up my planning that way and saying, this is the time and this is going to kill me. But later on, this is it. I also have teachers I had mentioned in my breakout room who have more of a system. So if you have a roster, you know, at high school, we have 65 to like 120 students. And so it's difficult. But if you have a system of knowing, like, I'm going to just do the first 10 kids this week, the next 10 kids the next week, the next 10 kids. So every month you're like recycling and giving feedback to everyone in an equitable way, and not just students who like you connect with, or not just students who are the first on your roster. Speed grader is always alphabetical. Don't always give really good feedback to your first half of your alphabet and not to your second half of your alphabet, because I have done that. Yes. So kind of knowing those things. But I think it's really about, what are you looking for? Just like reading comprehension, right? What are you searching for? It's look for these things, give feedback on just those things. Don't be caught up by the little stuff. That's my piece of advice.
Thank you. Kat, did you have anything that you wanted to share?
I think just the only thing, you know, I'm just to tag off what Rebecca said is I have to make it a routine. I have to schedule it in. Things are flying so fast and things change on a moment by moment basis that I've got to have some protected just feedback time to do that. And again, I think so if it becomes habit, you don't have to spend so much executive functioning time worrying about it. So I try and make those habits early in the year and sustain them throughout as best I can. And then when things fall apart, get back on as fast as possible.
Thanks, Kat. We want to open it up. If you've got amazing things that you're doing in your classroom with feedback, or if you also want to talk about those tips and tricks that you're using for effective and efficient feedback, please go ahead, raise your hand and we'll call on you.
I'm going to call out Jim in the chat. Jim, if you can go ahead and speak a little to the media comments in Canvas and what your thoughts are on that, just expand on it.
Yeah, I just have had a lot better luck using the media comments. Both, it allows me to use my voice and inflection to build a relationship with my students, which has been really powerful because then they see a real person behind the comments and not something that's written. But also I speak faster than I can type everything I need to get down, and I can go into it in more detail in that way. So using media comments and either recording video or audio has been really powerful. And then occasionally I will even use Screencastify to screencast SpeedGrader, go over their document and put the YouTube link or the Google Drive link in as their feedback, so they can see exactly what I'm talking about as I'm talking to them about it. And that's been very powerful. My other trick for feedback that I have to give 100 times is there's the Chrome add-on called ProKeys. And if you use that, you can program in things that you're constantly saying and then push 2 buttons and it will dump that into your comment, and then you're giving that quickly.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that you mentioned the extension. If you can grab that web, the URL for us and pop that in the chat, I'll make sure to put that into the back channel documents that we have going on, because we are trying to pull everything out and put in those documents for you guys. And then I know for me personally, my brain doesn't work very well with the short key command codes like that. So an extension I use is called Permanent Clipboard, where I can type in those long-winded comments and feedbacks that I use over and over and over again. And I press it and it allows me to copy and paste. That's just simply because I think sometimes in the heat of the moment, it's hard for me to remember Command R+ gives them this comment on thesis statements or whatever. So I love when we get a couple of different ideas like those extensions to help us out, because our brains all work in a little bit different way. And then I also wanted to say, Chris said in the chat that there is the Canvas Studio option that gives you the Screencast Pro features, and it's embedded within Canvas. So that could be something to look into for some of those media comments or feedback.
And something that Jim said too, that like he knows intuitively, and I think many of us as teachers know, but is proven by research, is that written comments come off harsher than audio or video comments. Think about an email that you get from like a parent, and then you talk to them and you're like, oh my gosh, this parent's so nice. But in the email they came out, that's how it is with the comments too. And you really want to think about our students who have been hurt by our academic setting and have been constantly told that their grammar's not good or this is not good. So you need to be really careful with tone, especially with students, and building, I think, that academic comments. And I think that audio or the video is really helpful for that.
And then I'll just kind of stick with you, Rebecca, on this, because someone did ask in the back channel about allotting time for students to go through and see that feedback. Because I know I personally realized that they didn't even look at the at the video feedback, or sometimes I know you've shared with me in the past that the annotated feedback that you give over the top of some documents has to be found in a different way. So I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether I was in live class or my live Zoom, we do it all together. And I give, and honestly, it takes 20 or 30 minutes. And I know that's a lot of time, but we also know, right, you took that time to give the individual feedback, and how students will be able to use that feedback and also ask questions if your feedback isn't clear, or if you forgot something, or you're using a code that you forgot to tell this period about or something. And so I do it right in class. I say, okay, I gave you all feedback. This is how you view it. And I go through that. And then I give them a minute. Everyone pull up your document. Okay, now they have their document. Okay, look over, write some notes down for yourself. And then I typically create a new Canvas assignment that says, hey, here is the feedback that Mrs. Larson gave me. Oftentimes we're doing peer kind of feedback as well. These are what my peers told me. This is my plan of action, right? This is what I'm going to do. And that way they also have a stepping stone of like, this is what I'm supposed to do next. Because sometimes when we tell students like your thesis needs to be stronger, they don't know what that means. It's like, I just started running and they'll say things like, you need to like move your this, and I'm like, I don't even know what a fartlek is. Like, you keep telling me to do this and I'm like, I don't know, right? We need to explain these things to students and realize that although they may have heard it many times, they may not understand what they mean by our feedback as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Rebecca. Kristin, Kristin Kiesel, I see that you've got your hand raised. Did you have something you would like to share?
I just wanted to add to what Jim had said about the media feedback in Canvas. As elementary, one of the things I was noticing also, my kids were not like paying attention to all the feedback I was giving, especially if it was media. So especially when it's late at night and, maybe not looking the best in pajamas. I one night filmed their feedback with just the stuffed animal my kids had left on the couch, and they thought that was the funniest thing ever. And so now it's kind of become a thing where if I do leave the video feedback, it's like, which stuffed animal is she going to pick of her kids? And so they've started watching more of those videos, and wanting to see those because it's the fun stuffed animal giving them feedback, and I don't do a voice, but it's just something that something to keep them engaged, something new. They got kind of sick of seeing my face, I feel like, all the time. And even in the, video feedback, they were like, oh, it's her again. We see her all day. We hear her all day, but now it's the stuffed animal. And, we have a plethora at our home. So that's who gives the feedback, is the stuffed animals now. And it does save a lot of time. The video doesn't have to be on me. I can be, midnight looking my best, and the animal doesn't care.
Kristin, that's amazing. I think everybody's gonna go and find their stuffy right now and make that happen. I'm seeing all the smiles and people being like, that's the best. I can't wait for my own kids who are in Beaverton to either have, that kitty lawyer or some type of stuffy giving feedback. And if you guys want to put some of your best ones in the back channel so that we could share and one up each other, I think that would be my favorite thing. Any other amazing nuggets like that, right? And that's elementary, but I can see middle school, high schooler kids loving it. My teacher wait time is super strong.
I'm kind of going back and trying to grab some of the pieces in the chat. And I know John Plunkett from Bethany mentioned a little bit about writing conferring and adding annotation over the top of some of the pieces. I don't know if we want to, if John's still here and he can kind of expand on it.
I just thought I'd mention it. It's something that I do from time to time. One of the problems with the typed format, especially if they use the notes template, is you're pretty much limited to a voice comment or a written comment. But if you take a screenshot of it, generally it fits nicely paragraph by paragraph. You can then upload that back into their journal and then create basically a recording. And then if I use the iPad, I can annotate on it live in real time while recording my voice. And it leaves maybe a 2-minute message, and it would be more like conferring in person. So it has your handwritten notes on it, which they see appearing over time. And because it's like a little animated show, they will watch it to the end, and better yet, so do their families.
That's great, John. And I can see that working at middle school, high school too, if I've got my teacher iPad and annotating on things, or what Jim was saying with Screencastify. I know that there were some questions about emojis, so I wanted to give Rebecca a minute to talk about that.
Thanks, Kristin. Because we are talking about ABAR and this, I really, as everyone's like, yes, I'm going to use emojis, which I think is great. But I think thinking about perhaps your skin tone of your emoji is really thoughtful, as both yourself as an educator and who you are, and perhaps opening up to the conversation to your students age appropriately. I know we're K through 12 here. But by default, it's yellow. And everyone thinks, well, oh, that's just yellow. And, you know, Simpsons are yellow. But we know that yellow default is white. And so they've done studies on this. Gretchen McCullen writes, Because Internet, it's a great book, and she talks about emojis specifically. But the yellow is defaulted white. White people tend to use the yellow, and people of color tend to use actual colors. And so we have that kind of white centeredness, even with something like technology, something to think about, like I said, discussing with your students or with me. Even in your Zoom, your reactions, you can set to different colors. And like me and my friend, it's like, well, maybe you have one color in the summer, right? And one color in the winter, depending on like your skin tone and what happens throughout. But it's also something just to be thoughtful on of yourself as you're giving feedback to students. And again, they will notice this. They will notice that perhaps you use a color, and having those conversations to discuss, well, this is why, and this is how I identify, and this is how you identify. And the thought of the emojis that also have been brought in to have emojis with hijab and emojis with different, you know, now we have redheaded emojis and all of these different things. So that's just something to think about as we're using these tools. Any tool that we have, we always want to think about how was that created? What does that mean to us and our center of being, and what it's going to kind of convey and communicate to students as well. So just a note on that as we're talking about emojis.
Thank you, Rebecca. I really appreciate that reminder as we think about using our digital tools. I also saw in the chat, we have a couple of our LITs here, and just a reminder to take advantage of our instructional assistants, our LITs, and others to give feedback. And if Colette, you want to unmute and share any of those other thoughts, love to hear from you.
Well, I know it's hard when you're a writing teacher. How do you give feedback to all these different students? So whenever I'm invited to come in and work on a research project, I'm always constantly say, put me in a breakout room and send me the kids that you know need the extra one-on-one help. Or all, you know, the teachers will send me notes of like, these are the kids who are behind in this project. And so I'll reach out to them one-on-one and say, hey, do you want to meet on Zoom? Or just share with me your citations and I'll give you some feedback, you know. And they always do it because they're like thinking it's part of the assignment. So take advantage of the people who are in and around your school to also to do feedback, because and sometimes it's hard because I don't have the relationship with the kids, but it's also great sometimes because I'm an outsider and I can say the exact same thing that Rebecca said, but say it my way in a different way. And then now they're hearing it from two adults.
Thank you, Colette. We have a couple more minutes if people have other nuggets that they'd like to share or questions that you'd like to ask. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
I have one.
Yes, please, Sonia.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I am a little bit distracted right now. I'm just saying. So if someone already talked about Book Creator, I'm sorry, I won't talk about it a lot. I just want to say that between, you know, doing a class book and them sharing their own books, you know, around culture, around Black Lives Matter and things like that, it's just an incredible resource for them to really share who they are and share their full-on identity, you know, and for everyone to have access to it. It's just, I just love it. So that's been the best platform of the year. That's all. That's my advertisement.
Thank you, Sonia. I appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Carrie to talk about our future sessions.
I'm happy to do that. Just wanted to let you know that this is a part of a series that we have been doing, and we have 3 more dates coming up, and I'm not 100% sure that they align with K through 12. I think some of these dates are exclusively secondary that are coming up for ABAR opportunities, but on the 31st, we're going to be talking about digital tools to build and maintain relationships. The 5th is collaboration and discussion tools. And again, I'm really excited about June 9th. Okay, so we did this year. What does next year look like? What are the practices that continue next year? How do we structure it moving forward? So that's the conversation that we'll be having on June 9th. So I wanted to put that on your radar if you do have professional development openings that I believe they're all in the afternoon, just like this session was. I wanted to make sure that you were aware of those. And then prior to, we're going to head back in just a moment to the main session. They're doing a closing and reflection session for the entirety. But we do have an exit survey, and I believe they have their, oh, it's all happening in the chat. They're putting in the self-check-in link so that you can get your PDUs through Teacher Source. So that link has just been put in the chat. And there is also another link to the exit survey. And the exit survey is for all of the sessions, not just this session exclusively, but for the whole program. So wanted to make sure that you got access to both of those. And in that slide deck, if you're looking, we already had a previous session. It was on engagement that we did January, I think. We did a session on engagement, and the resources are at the bottom half of this slide deck. And we'll just continue adding resources to this same slide decks from all of our sessions that you can come back to. And I know some of the sessions are not recorded for a variety of different reasons and people feeling comfortable to share, but because this one isn't as personal, our session was recorded, and our previous session was recorded as well, and you can access those to see any of the sessions. I think that's it. We want to thank you for joining us. And do we have the link to go back to the main session? We can stick that in the chat for you, and I think it's the same kind of a deal where you can actually go to the Zoom link, or you can watch it on YouTube if that Zoom link has reached capacity. We want to thank you all for coming today, and hope you got some good time to chat with peers and maybe some new ideas to try.